Iran just shot down a Black Hawk helicopter and the entire helicopter crew are dead. But something you need to know is that this helicopter was shot down as it was trying to search for the missing crew members of an F-15 fighter jet that had been shot down as well only an hour before that as it was flying over Iran. So I'm going to bring you back to that fighter jet. Well, a few hours ago, an American F-15 Eagle fighter jet was shot down as it was flying over Iran. It was the first time America admitted that one of their fighter jets was shot down, although Iran has claimed many times with video proof throughout this war. Regardless of that though, the two crew members of that F-15 fighter jet, we believe, ejected whilst it was shot down. Iran though knows that if a fighter jet is shot down and the crew eject, then they don't land that far away from the crash site. And Iran found the crash site very quickly. They found the debris of the jet and they posted pictures of it. And this meant that the crew members were nearby, and so Iran immediately came out and put a $60,000 bounty onto each one of those crew members. And those pilots were on the run, whilst we believe pretty much all of Iran was looking for them. And so the US understood just how pressing and important it was to get back those pilots. If they got captured by Iran, not only would it be a huge embarrassment, but the US would lose a lot of leverage, and Iran would now have two pilots to use as leverage to try and have peace. So the US couldn't afford to have that happen. So they launched a massive search and rescue operation to try and find them. Dozens of aircraft flew in, whether it was C-130 cargo planes, whether it was Black Hawk helicopters, etc. They had MQ-9 Reaper drones and all of the intelligence planes flying over to try and find these two pilots. The problem is though, after an hour of searching, they still couldn't find the pilots. The pilots had either been captured or they were doing a great job at hiding so that no one could find them. At the time of recording this, we still don't know whether those pilots have been captured or rescued by the US. But what we do know is after an hour of search and rescue operations, a Black Hawk helicopter that was involved in those search and rescue operations over Iran was shot down. Iran claimed responsibility for the shooting down of a Black Hawk that was searching for those pilots of the F-15. And this was a massive embarrassment, but something more important is obviously when a fighter jet shot down, the crew can eject. You can't do that in a helicopter. A Black Hawk doesn't have ejection seats. And so this would suggest that the crew of that helicopter are probably dead, or at the very least, very badly injured, because a helicopter crash is not nice. I'm sure that over the next 24 hours, we'll get reports of whether the pilots were rescued or whether they were captured. And so I will cover that in the next Iran news recap, because I make these videos every day. There's so much more that's happened in just the last 24 hours. And every day I make a video covering what's happened in the last 24 hours of the war in Iran. And there's way more stuff that you need to know about. So stick around because that's more important than this. Something else that happened yesterday was the US came out and bombed Iran's biggest bridge. The problem is though, that was a civilian target and at least 8 civilians on the bridge were killed and another 95 were wounded. This bridge was the biggest suspension bridge in Iran. It's over 136 meters tall and it was recently unveiled, costing about $400 million to build. It was not a military target at all. The US simply bombed it as it was symbolic because now they've bombed the biggest bridge. But something important is this actually isn't a surprise. This comes only a day after the US President Trump came out and threatened to bomb Iran, quote, back to the Stone Ages. A video actually came out of the rubble of the bridge being bombed, and we now know that the US carried out at least 2 airstrikes onto the bridge. It wasn't one that missed. Reports initially came out saying that the US didn't mean to bomb the bridge because it was a civilian target, but because they bombed it twice, it proves it was intentional. Trump came out and then said, quote, the biggest bridge in Iran comes tumbling down, never to be used again. And he also said there's, quote, much more to follow. Now this is technically a war crime. The US has carried out a strike onto civilians and a civilian target. It was not being used by military, it was not being used to transit government officials, etc. The US bombed another civilian target in Iran and dozens of civilians have now been affected by it. Although something important that you need to know is when the US first went into Iran over 4 weeks ago now, they said it was under the guise that they want to make the people of Iran prosper. They want to get rid of the government and help the people of Iran do better. This bridge was a way of helping the people do better. Bridges like this connect very deep valleys. Valleys that would usually take hours to cross by car. But a bridge can shorten that distance to minutes. And when you do that, it allows far more trade to happen. It means bigger cargo can transit through, meaning that more companies can make money, helping the economy. And so this bridge helped the economy a lot for Iran and by proxy helped the people of Iran. But the US still bombed it, suggesting that that was a complete lie, and the US has no interest in helping the people of Iran. But those 2 points are just the attacks against Iran. Something else that's happened in the last 24 hours is Iran's responses. And Iran's responses have not calmed down at all. You might remember a few days ago in a video I made, Iran carried out an attack onto Emirates Global Aluminium, a company in the UAE. That company is actually the largest non-oil company in the UAE. It's one of the world's biggest producers of aluminium, and it actually supplies a lot of the aluminium used in American military equipment. That's why Iran bombed it, because it helps the US military and the Israeli military carry out attacks against Iran. Now, at the time, we were told it was actually a relatively small single drone attack. The company announced that they had halted operations temporarily, but they didn't say it was a huge attack. Well, it turns out it actually caused a lot more damage, that attack, than we thought. The company has finally come out and said, quote, "Early indications are that a complete restoration of primary aluminium production could take up to a year." That's right, this single Iranian attack, this single drone and missile attack against it has caused damage which could take a year to repair. And that's actually one of the main things about this war. It's not the direct damage, it's the indirect effects. The attacks Iran is carrying out are not onto military sites, which can be easily fixed. No, the attacks Iran is carrying out are onto companies, industrial companies, and that is what causes the damage. For context, a few weeks ago, Iran carried out a massive attack onto the Ras Laffan gas field in Qatar. That gas field and gas refinery cost about $25 billion to build. It took decades. Well, in a single night of Iranian attacks, Iran caused an estimated $20 billion a year in damages. And Qatar says it's going to take 10 years to repair it back to what it was before the single night of attacks. And so the consequences of this war are going to be far more than just short-term. The long-term effects of this war are going to have a knock-on effect around the world. Iran is causing a lot of damage, and that's why they're targeting the industrial facilities and not Israeli military sites. Because Iran doesn't need to cause damage militarily. No, they just want to cause damage economically, which is another reason why they've shut the Strait of Hormuz, etc. But there was one other interesting thing that came out yesterday that's not a huge breaking news, but it is something worth knowing about. And that's actually that we got a video of an Iranian missile malfunctioning and then crashing back into Iran. But what happened when this missile malfunctioned was quite interesting. From the video, we can see that the missile malfunctioned and then crashed back into Iran. But it didn't cause a massive explosion like a missile usually does. Missiles obviously have warheads which explode upon impact. Well, this Iranian missile, when it malfunctioned, it didn't cause a big fireball when it crashed back into Iran. No, it just caused a bit of smoke from debris. But I want to compare that to the Israeli and American missiles when they go wrong. When they go wrong and malfunction and crash back into where they took off from, it causes a huge explosion. An explosion that clearly causes a lot of damage. The same amount of damage intended that it was when they wanted to hit the target. And so this Iranian missile malfunctioning today, it suggests that Iran has technology that they know when their missiles are malfunctioning. And the missiles automatically disarm the warheads, meaning that they don't explode upon impact if they go wrong. And this is likely technology that they've gotten from the Russians and the Chinese. This is quite advanced technology, stuff that we didn't believe Iran had. But over the last few weeks of war, we've definitely seen a lot more cases of Iran coming out with things that we didn't know they had either. And so that's something you need to know about. But something happened yesterday which could drag NATO into the war, to be fair, and that's way bigger news than what this is. And so to make sure that you haven't wasted your time watching this video, you need to be informed on everything that's happening. And you need to know that NATO could be on the verge of invoking Article 5 and joining the war. And to make sure that you haven't wasted your time, click here to watch that video that I made yesterday on that, because NATO might actually be going to war. But if you have seen that, come back tomorrow for the next news recap where I cover all of the news from the last 24 hours.